Hey, Alan Mathews here again. This video is going to talk about some variations you can use for your arpeggio practice. If you're watching this, you've probably watched video on some practice progressions, different progressions that you can use in your practice to make it more interesting, more beautiful. Well, this is going to give you more ideas on what to do with those progressions as well, so that actually you're practicing your musicality, you're practicing your technique, you're having new challenges and new stresses, things that can make your playing much better. And so hopefully you'll find some of these that will be properly challenging for you so that you can go forward, keep things moving along, keep at the edge of your seat in your arpeggio practice, and hopefully learn some things, get some new options for your arpeggio practice. Have fun. So hopefully you've mastered these chords generated by the E major scale that I suggested in a previous video for practicing your arpeggios with. So if you've got that and are ready to move to the next level of practicing it, then this video will give you some tips for different things that you can do using this to amp it up a little bit, to become a little bit better at playing everything that you play, basically. So I'm just going to give you a couple of examples here. So I'm just going to use PIM for kicks because it's the first one, and you probably know that one if you're watching this. You should. If you don't know these arpeggio patterns and you haven't gone through the arpeggio patterns and you haven't watched the previous video on this progression, then I would recommend just going ahead and doing that and then come back to this one. So doing this, the first we're going to talk about is timbre, and so this just moves it back and forth, and this could be tricky, so go slow. But what I'm going to do here is play up over the fretboard for a first run of 2. So I'm going PIM on the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd, and PIM, and then PIM on the 4th, 3rd, and 1st. And now all the way back by the bridge, much more perpendicular to the string. So this is a very woolly, warm, wet sound. So we're doing crazy extremes. All the way up here, all the way up. You could go all the way up to the 12th fret. And you'll just have to work on maybe a couple of times per chord. So it's just you're going to the extremes of position. What this does is it gets you to free up this arm and lets it move a little bit. So often in our playing we just lock right here and then we just stay there because we're just locked down on it. This just demands that you free up your arm, play more like a cello player, and just get that thing moving back and forth. And what you're going to find is that you have to refine the string on each time. It's a different instrument up here than it is right here. Your hand's in a different position here than it is down here. And so you have to deal with the complexities that brings up. So it's really good exercise for that. Another one that you could do are dynamics, which is, we could just do terrace for one. We could do terraced dynamics. Terraced, T-E-R-R-A-C-E, terraced dynamics. Or you have one dynamic level, let's say it's piano, and then you have another that is forte. And there's no crescendo or decrescendo between them. It's just, you're playing like this, then you're playing like this, then you're playing like this, then you're playing like this. It's very dramatic shifts. So we could do that. Very quiet, very loud. Now make sure that your tempo stays steady while you're doing it. You can't play the slow stuff or the quiet stuff slow and then the loud stuff fast. That doesn't work. That's not what you want to do. So just keep it, and it might be, and when you're practicing any sort of dynamics things, you want to exaggerate. I've talked about this at length in other videos and other places, but exaggeration is the key to getting better at everything. So if you're going to practice with dynamics, be an extremist. Practice pianissimo, if that's a word. Then practice as quiet as you can get it. And contrast that with as loud as you can get it without overdriving the instrument. You might actually even want to slightly overdrive the instrument. There it is. Just so that you can find the upper range so that you'll know what overdrives the instrument. Hurdlers, I'm told this, I'm not actually a hurdler myself. I've never really been a track and field guy. Really, I run when chased. But from what I'm told, whenever people are training to jump hurdles, then the best way for them to train is that they go and they just barely knock over, they barely skim and knock over the top of each hurdle so that every one of them falls behind them, but they're just barely just skimming them as they come over the top, and they just knock those over with their foot. And what it does is it trains them to know exactly where the top of that hurdle is, and that way they can just barely get over it whenever they actually go, and they don't have to expend extra energy jumping jumping this far over it. They can just go and just be right over it and conserve energy. So we can use that exact same thing here, in that we can barely overdrive the instrument so that we know exactly where it is that it overdrives. And that way we actually know the upper range. We know how loud we can get to be loud. And we also can then know how soft we can get to get soft. In general, I mean, we could talk about dynamics here for a long time. I love this subject. But the bottom line is, be extreme, blast, expand your range on these. If you're doing anything, you want to do it as an exercise. You want to do it to the nth degree. You really want to just, make it huge, make it exaggerated so that you're actually getting the most out of your practice time. So that's dynamics. The other thing, that's Terraced Dynamics. The other thing is crescendo, decrescendo. You could do a swell and back down for them. Let's do that again. Let's start off soft, get louder, and then get quieter. We'll go through 2 times each. We'll go up on one and down on the next. So the first 2 times we're getting louder, the second 2 times we're getting quieter, and it's just constantly going like that. Then you can actually reverse that so that you start loud and then get quieter. So you start loud, you get quieter through the first pattern of 2, get louder toward the second pattern of 2. I like that one better. I think it's more musical and more useful in the pieces that we play to phrase that way generally, because then you're actually crescendoing to the harmony change instead of decrescendoing to the harmony change. But that's just a musical thing. I would be able to do it both ways. The next one of these is going to be similar to the first, in that we're changing tones, but instead of actually moving the arm back and forth right here, we're going to keep the hand right over the hole and then change the timbre by changing the angle by which we're playing the string. So we're going to go through one pattern very obliquely to the string, being very slanted to the string, making a very warm sound. And then we're going to go more perpendicular to the string and make a brighter sound. So we're staying in the same place. The right hand's not moving around, but it's approaching the strings differently. And this is very useful in your pieces, because if you master this skill and you're comfortable with this, then you can add a lot of color to your music. And seek the very warmest sound that you can on the warm side and the very brightest sound that you can on the right side. And also, it's really important whenever you're doing these type of things is to go all the way to the end with one before going to the next. So in other words, don't blend them. As you start to get to the end of one, don't make them more terraced, like we were doing the dynamics. Make them more terraced in that it's warm and then bright, and then warm and then bright. And it doesn't blend, or they don't wash into one another. Think of it as two totally different things. In your practice, if you need to actually stop, and reset each time, then I highly recommend doing that. Because that'll help you a lot. You want it to be, there's this, then there's this, then there's this, then there's this, as opposed to being really wishy-washy and around. You want to be able to turn on a dime, because in music, in the music that you play, you're going to want to be able to have the ability and the creativity to find these spots, but the ability to turn on a dime so that you have this beautiful lush line. And you can actually do that. You can just throw in little peppery, spiky spots if you want to, or in a more staccato passage, you can throw in some beautiful legato line as just kind of a sweetness behind it somewhere. And so there's all of this color that you can put into your playing if you can do it. If you have the creativity to actually know that it's there and find a good place to do it and hear in the music what the music needs, but also if you've actually practiced in such a way, which is what we're talking about here, so that you've got the chops, you've got the skills to actually play it. Another thing that we can do with these is accents. And the deal with accents are very oftentimes misunderstood as being a loud note. And an accent isn't a loud note. An accent is a note that is louder than the notes around it. It doesn't necessarily mean it's loud. We see it above a note oftentimes. Sometimes they'll do it in the melody, something like that. But it doesn't mean that the note is loud. It simply means that it's louder than the notes around it. And on the guitar, because our dynamic range can be so small, of course we practice, as we've been talking about, we practice so that we increase that dynamic range, but we still have, our loud isn't all that loud. And so what we want to do with accents, the first thing we do whenever we're dealing with accents is reduce the dynamics of everything else around it. So if we have an accented note, it's not that we're playing that note loud, we're playing everything else quietly. And so that's what, we're basically creating contrast between that note, the accented note, and the note around it, the notes around it. So that's what we're doing with accents. We're not just hammering it out louder than everything else. We're basically just increasing the contrast. And one of the ways to do that is to bring everything else down. So on these patterns, another way to practice is to take each note individually and bring out that note and bring everything else down. And really, it's a quiet game. It's not so much a loud game. It's easy to play a note loud. You just play it normally. And if you're actually using this good technique of closing your hand, then the note is strong and has a presence anyway. So you don't need to play that any louder. What we're going to be practicing with is actually making everything else quieter. And so we'll start with the thumb. And so we'll just accent the thumb. That means it's louder. It's just a normal strong note. Everything else, the I and the M in this case, we'll do P-I-M again, is going to be very quiet. And so the question is, how quiet can you get the other ones while keeping the one that is accented strong? That was the thumb. You could do I. There it is. And then you could do M. Now the hardest note to play whenever you're playing accented things and unaccented notes is the note right after the accent. So if we're accenting M, P and I are very quiet, M is loud, and then P is quiet again. The tendency, especially whenever we're going fast, is for the note right after the accented note to also be loud. And that's what we have to really keep an eye out for. And that's what this exercise is so great for. And using these type of things in our arpeggio practice is so good for, is because we're not playing from memory on a big piece that we're playing. We're not dealing with all this. We're just playing this simple pattern on a memorized left hand. We're just doing, there's no music in front of us. There's nothing else to do but actually focus in on what we're actually doing with our hands and controlling the right hand. And so the note after the accent is a very quiet note. So soft, soft, loud, soft, soft, loud, soft, soft, loud. And so the goal is to get everything else as quiet as possible, but so that it still pings. On this particular exercise, using the M finger is not a terribly interesting melody because it's just B and E back and forth. But you get the point. Bring everything else down around accented notes and be especially careful of the note right after the accent. So there you have some arpeggio variations right there. Hope that you can go slow, hope that you can do good work and really implement patience and precision and attention to detail in everything that you're doing with these variations and also with everything else that you find yourself doing. Have fun.